Okay, cool. So what is it that you do, bro?
So right now I'm studying English Lit. So I'm in my final year.
Sick.
And
Sick.
yeah, I literally just started a clothing brand as well. So but before this, I was
Okay,
doing a
sick.
podcast. Yeah, I started a podcast last year, and I got Benjamin Zephaniah on that one.
Yeah, I saw that was sick, man.
Yeah, we had a bit of trouble with the audio, but apart from that, it was a great conversation. It was sick to have him on in it. So I'm trying to carry on that type of quality and level of podcast. So I was like, do you know what? Why not just reach out? So I was gonna start with an intro anyway. So
Okay.
so like today we're joined by Momodou, and he's a law grad, host of the Malcolmeffect podcast, member of the Baraka Boys podcast, and just an all-round activist that uses his platform to share his well-informed views on politics. So welcome to the Black XP podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, bro. It's an
Yeah.
honor and privilege, man. Thank you.
Nah, love. I actually was gonna say I actually saw you first on the Baraka Boys podcast.
Okay, yeah.
Because you know what was weird? I think around that time I was going through like a phase where like you felt like there wasn't really a cultural place for Black people within like Islamic history and stuff. So when I saw
Yeah.
you, Mustafa Briggs, a lot of the other brothers who are very intelligent, when I saw like kind of you lot come with new perspective and also the like the knowledge that you lot had, I thought that was very intriguing, and I think that's what kind of led me to your page and your podcast and stuff. So that was just sick. But when I've kind of looked more into it, it was good. Looked into you and Mustafa Briggs a bit more because of the way you thought, and I was intrigued with like how you articulated what you said, what you stood for. So like when I came to your page, I was kind of intrigued, and today I kind of wanted to talk about kind of like imperialism and colonialism and how it's evolved to like another level. Okay. So like I just wanted to ask you, how do you think that imperialism and colonialism has evolved, and how has it taken like a new type of landscape on?
I think when we think about like imperialism and colonialism, we can almost say that they can sometimes be interchangeably used in a way. When we think of colonialism, the colonial project is what, from the British Empire experience, is the exerting control over another nation to reap the benefits from that nation. So for example, we know that particularly West Africa during colonial years was the Queen, British head of state, was seen as the head of state of these countries. And the resources in those countries were not there to benefit people in that country, but rather there to be taken back to enrich, in this context, the British Empire. Yeah. This happened obviously in West Africa. It happened in the subcontinent as well, in British India, for example.
Yeah.
When we think of it, that's like colonialism in a nutshell. Obviously, there's much more to that. So obviously, when we have the wave of anti-colonial struggles, we have the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, have the likes of Amilcar Cabral, Sekou Toure, and people who want to fight for an independent Africa, an independent nation state, but also wider the political unification of Black people. Then we have a wide Pan-African movement that surges in, and you have Thomas Sankara as well being the more recent one, engaging in colonial struggles. So obviously, naturally, we know if a man's trying to cut off your bread, we saw what happened to the leaders that basically decided to be self-determined. Yeah, that man were either killed, assassinated, they were taken out, and what happens is, so then I'm painting this picture historically to kind of link what happens today. Yeah. Because think about today. Look at Venezuela today. We have President Maduro, who is the rightfully elected president of the people. Yeah. As people in the West, what do we say time and time again? That we love democracy. And we uphold democracy around the world. But what they don't tell you, what these men know, that when you have like terms and conditions that no one reads. Yeah, the fine print. The fine print and terms and conditions of democracy for us in the West I'm not even, I want to say us, I don't want to attach myself to that madness, but to the leading governments in the West is what? Terms and conditions say, we love democracy as long as the person doing the democracy loves us.
Yeah.
And loving us means that we have access to your resources, we can exploit you. And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of the time, these, it's almost like a foretelling of what happens in the future. When we look at Cuba, a socialist state, who had the Cuban Revolution, you had Fidel Castro. Not ignoring the many issues Castro had, but again, he wanted self-determination for his people. I think he's probably the most person to survive CIA assassination attempts in probably the history of man.
Yeah.
But Fidel Castro kicked out all the, at this time, the white plantation owning people with the bourgeoisie. And what happens now? These people now in 2020 are the grandsons of these people who were kicked out of Cuba because they were basically not for the people, then go on to vote for Republican Trump overwhelmingly. You know what I mean? So there's a link between people who either enrich the, in the Marxist language, the bourgeoisie, versus the working class people who are known as the proletariat. So I feel like that's just a picture of colonialism. And historically, now when we talk about imperialism and neo-colonialism, we're basically talking about the same thing, but because we don't have, there's no physical presence of these countries like there was in the same way, on paper, Gambia just celebrated its 56th Independence Day, for example. I think Ghana celebrating its independence shortly, and all these countries celebrating their independence. So on paper, these countries are quote unquote free. Yeah. What imperialism does today is it still privileges access to these countries to Western people. And the minute that these Western countries say, no, we want to be self-determined, we see what happens. The governments back coups, they go in for regime change.
Yeah, you see that in Bolivia.
Bolivia, exactly. Yeah. I hope that answers your question a little bit, bro.
Yeah, it does. I think when it comes to the West, I feel like every single country that they go into, every state they go into, and they claim that they're fighting democracy for, it's always kind of ironic that a couple years after, there's always a dictator that's ruling that country. There's an authoritarian type government. So to me, I've always felt like the way the West has evolved has always been, okay, cool, we have to move away from outwardly stealing resources to then putting certain leaders in pole position for us to kind of gain from a capital perspective. And even when you're talking about the effect that America had, or the West had on Latin America, you look at a lot of for example, the leader in Venezuela, I think it was in 2019, when I think the leader that was democratically voted for was taken down by right-wing fascists, and that they were actually funded by Americans as well. So if you look at a lot of times, I feel like even when it comes to Africa, we have it a lot where like you have corrupt leaders, or even in Latin America, it's corrupt leaders. But the people that are being put in positions it's because America has the strongest influence. And one thing that I've realized is that if you look at, for example, even the SARS unit in Nigeria now, like they're UK trained. Sometimes we don't understand the type of the kind of lengths and strength that like the West has. And even the other day I was having a conversation with someone, and they were telling me that I think the US has basically the US is the most powerful vote when it comes to the UN. So when we're talking about moving forward and fighting for democracy, when the US is there and they have this type of threshold, can change really be made? I don't really think so.
But that exactly what you're saying right there speaks to the imperial project that is the US. I mean, the US is on paper a republic, but for all intents and purposes, it's an empire.
Yeah.
Something like over 400 military bases around the world.
Wow.
Like, people don't even realize, if you just Google right now the term AFRICOM. What's AFRICOM? AFRICOM is the US in Africa, basically. And they're even brazen with it. On their website, it says, we have a unit of the military that engages in either training or data gathering for what? And it says for what on the website? to ensure our interests are being saved. What is that? That's an imperial project.
Yeah, 100%. That is, yeah. And I think when you look at that, America, I always say that America is probably the biggest corporation in the world. Before it's even a country, it's a corporation, and the way it functions is always like from a capitalist view. It's always like, how can we expand and have more and more? And that's where that kind of imperial link kind of comes in. But yeah, when I was actually looking at the West in general, one thing that you realize is that there's a continuous need and there's a greed for more and more and more. And I feel like now, I might be wrong, but now I feel like for the first time, you're starting to see a few more independent African states, and like not independent, but I'd say we're working towards it. And the leaders are being way more, they're very,
vocal.
Yeah, more vocal. So for example, if you have like the Tanzanian president right now, Magufuli, is way more, he wants to be very self-sustained, and he's kind of Pan-African and wants to move forward. He wants Africa to move forward and progress. So maybe now we're finally learning that we can progress by ourselves. Do you feel like we're moving in a positive direction?
You know, it's always hard to tell. I don't want to engage in predictions because one thing, I mean, I'm still very young, you know, alhamdulillah. But one thing I would say is just never know where the world is going to go.
Yeah.
I mean, predictions wise, I think America is an empire in decline. Okay. I think the kind of hegemony that America holds right now in terms of position in the world is being slowly diminished by like China, for example. Mm. I think that's a position that maybe I could say I will align with. As for African states directly, I watched recently the president of Ghana speaking about he wants to have like a one currency system. And you know, also he wants to institute a free trade agreement between more and more African nations, which is obviously good. Yeah. So I think, you know, but the problem is, let's be honest, man, me and you're both like African, even from different sides.
Yeah.
Yes, there's Western imperialism, which is a problem. Yes, there's like intervention. But one thing that's holding many of countries back is the corruption.
Yeah.
African leaders are far too comfortable with enriching themselves, their family, their close circle at the expense of the whole country.
Yeah. And then you look at that now, and you look at the effect that that's having even on the Caribbean and on Africa. You see, it's weird when you go back home and you see like so many different Chinese people and that are building and settling in. And now you're looking at China like they're trying to build their own empire and trying to become a colonial power as well. So when you look at sometimes how, like you might look and you think, okay, cool, yeah, Africa's progressing, but at the same time, it's always one sellout. But even that sellout, although like people are like, yeah, let's scrutinize our corrupt leaders, we always have to go back to the source, and the source is the West. So I feel like in order for us to, Karen, sorry, what are you gonna say?
I was gonna say this point of China I know China being a neo-colonial power has become a buzzword for many people. And I think maybe surface level it looks like that, but I would always point out the history of China in Africa and the history of the West in Africa is completely different. If you look at the history of China in Africa, what was their role? Their role was supporting anti-colonial struggles. Which freedom fighter or Pan-Africanist revolution didn't meet with Chairman Mao? You know, Thomas Sankara met with Chairman Mao of China. Sorry, not Thomas Sankara. Kwame Nkrumah. All these Amilcar Cabral. All these like real revolutionaries who wanted independence for African nations and Pan-African got their funding and backing from who? From two places particularly, from Cuba and from China.
I never knew.
Yes, I think. Yeah. So like, if you Google like Pan-Africanism and China's role in that, they were funding a lot of these movements, by the way. In South Africa during apartheid, who sent help? Cuba.
Yeah.
And China, don't get me wrong, that's not to excuse. I think what China is doing in many ways is problematic and should be spoken about. But I would like to say the history of China in Africa is different. The history of Western Africa has purely been one of like rape, pillage, stealing, impoverishment, causing genocide, yeah? And then people might say, you know, but you know, the IMF and all these people, they now support African states. But first of all, that doesn't go to the people. And second of all, you just further put these countries in debt.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, and we know what happens when Hugo Chavez says we want to be out of, you know, clear the debt of my country. We know what happens to these people. So what I would say, yes, I would say China, we can interrogate that further and probably don't have necessary knowledge on that. But what I would point to, the history of China in Africa is a bit different. They were like, you know, lockstep. Even so far as a lot of like Kwame Nkrumah, a lot of African leaders adopted China's way of governing. You know, because when they looked into the world at the time, a lot of post-independence leaders, they saw what? They saw, okay, we need to do things that's different. Capitalism isn't working for us. What works for us, a lot of these people chose socialism.
Yeah.
And obviously a type of socialism was obviously what's happening in China under Mao. So yeah, I just want to point to that difference in history.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and that's why it's very important to make a distinction between sometimes a colonial power and a neo-colonial power, because I feel like in the last decade or so, China's probably become a neo-colonial power. And you look at what they're doing now can't be excused. And you see, for example, how much debt they're putting Jamaica into, and countless different countries. But it is true, I think you have to give maybe credit historically. But I think one thing that maybe has to be worked on more is maybe how do we decolonize, and how do we go about decolonization as a people? Like, do you think that starts with education? Like, where do you think we start with that?
Are you talking about decolonization in what field, or where are we talking about it?
I'm talking about
within ourselves, within our history, like where?
As in within, for example, I'd say specifically Black British history, or even you can kind of group us in America and say, as any Black people living in the West specifically, how do we go about decolonization?
So if you're talking about like in terms of history or telling our story, you have to first and foremost decenter whiteness. So decentering whiteness is not like, again, people, you know, it's I know you lot are suffering in the UK with your inept leaders who have not done the reading. People think like decolonizing history means not telling the truth, or removing history, or burning history books. Oh, come on, man. Decolonizing history means what? Decolonizing history means that we actually tell the full truth of what happened.
Yeah.
You know, and we lay bare to the stories that where Black people are involved, also not Black people, anyone who's non-white are involved. We tell the whole truth, no matter how ugly it is. Because, for example, how many, like, you went to a British school system, I assume. I did as well.
Yeah.
We didn't know about Churchill's involvement in the Bengal famine.
No way.
We didn't know about Churchill was an avid racist. How we called people likened to animals who were Black. You know, but did we know, like, David Cameron, our Prime Minister, who had the audacity and the caucasity to go to the funeral of Nelson Mandela, when in the 80s he was giving out leaflets on the conservative view, of course, Nelson Mandela a terrorist. You know what I mean? So my point is that decolonizing history is just telling the whole history. For example, do we even know the extent that Britain was involved in the slave trade? We don't. We think about slavery just in terms of America. We don't think about, like, we have slave ports in the UK that went on. Our industrial revolution was enriched by the forced labor of chattel slavery. We don't, and even when British people tell their story of slavery, what do they say? They say that oh yes, they were involved in slavery. However, you know, we had a change of conscience, and then we abolished it. Okay, that's nice. And then even who they say abolished it, they say William Wilberforce abolished it, another white man. So okay, if you're change of conscience, why, when you were abolishing slavery, and you were one of the earliest European countries to abolish slavery, okay, why were you simultaneously then supporting France quelling the Haitian Revolution. If you supported the abolition of slavery, why are you saying it's wrong for us, but we're going to support France doing it against the Haitians when they want to be self-determined?
And they still lost against the Haitians as well.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Yeah. So my point is that you can't advocate. So my point is that we have to tell these stories.
Yeah.
That's what colonialism looks like. You know what I mean? For me, anyway.
And I feel like, do you know what's crazy? When I was in school, I never knew better. So I thought Churchill was like a hero to Britain. And then you come on, you learn later on that like the institutional racism in the education system is so real. And even like recently, the Ofsted chief basically said that he's against making the curriculum more diverse, and he feels like it's already diverse enough.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy to me, because you know what was mad? I was even telling someone the other day that when I was in school, they taught me as well, like, not to veer off, but it's like they taught me that Malcolm X was like an evil type guy, and then with Martin Luther King was like he was this peaceful person. And I think that's one thing that I learned through Frantz Fanon. He says in order for you to go through decolonization, it can't be done through a gentleman's agreement. So it can't just be like, it can't be passive. It has to be, it's kind of like we have to take control of how do we teach ourselves. And I think when I was speaking to Benjamin Zephaniah, one thing he was telling me was that when it comes to education, we can't rely on the educational system. So he was saying, I think in the 80s, he opened up a series of Pan-African schools, which taught young Black people and even other minorities about their history and taught you the truth. And I think that's where, if we're talking about decolonization and talking about taking control and maybe kind of being progressive, we need to maybe we need to start thinking about educating ourselves a little bit more and working together as a collective before.
100%. I mean, look at, so one of the most brilliant minds, I think, when it comes to racial history in the UK, who's in public anyway, is Akala.
Yeah.
Akala's brilliant. And I think everyone of your listeners should read his book, Natives. It's a brilliant piece of work. He went to Pan-African Saturday School.
Yeah, and that was opened by Benjamin Zephaniah.
Oh, I saw. Was it one of his schools?
Yeah, it was one of his schools. It was Benjamin Zephaniah. Yeah, it was crazy.
See how it all links in. See how it all links in. And we look at Akala. Look what they did for him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you go on to the point of Malcolm and Martin. I always mention this a lot, and people don't really. I'm glad you said that, by the way, because I got into a Facebook discussion the other day with one of my own teachers, and I said, I put out saying that, in school I was told Martin was peace-loving and Malcolm was a radical extremist.
Yeah.
And then I also said, I got into a fight one day, and then over racism, and my teacher said to me, "You have to be more like Martin and less like Malcolm." And then, so I put this on Facebook. I said this in a talk previously. And then one of my teachers commented saying that I don't believe that ever happened in school. Okay. But then you just saying this now affirms that, yes, in the British history, they actually set it up as Martin versus Malcolm, don't they?
Yeah, they do, 100%. And you know what was funny was that when I even learned a bit more about Martin Luther King, that wasn't his full stance. People took what they wanted and kind of portrayed a certain picture of like Martin Luther King being this passive person, but it wasn't about it. He was never passive. And even Malcolm X, I remember watching an interview of one white man who actually grew up in the Deep South, and he watched the Malcolm X movie by Spike Lee, when Denzel's featuring it, and he said looking back at what Malcolm was saying, he was never this evil person that they were portraying him to be in the Deep South. It was like, it was all a facade. Everything that he was doing was just saying, look, protect yourself at all times, mobilize, make sure that you're collectivized, you're strong as a unit. But then when that's taken out to be violent and something it's not, it's problematic, because then as a kid, you might paint a picture of Malcolm in your head because you might not know better. You might not go into detail and research about him as a figure, really. So,
but I mean, Martin, this thing of Martin being some passive guy. Okay, if he's so passive, how come Martin's getting arrested more than 30 times? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How is And people don't realize Martin's non-violence didn't come from him being scared, because if he was scared, he was on the front line, bro. Like, he was getting the dogs attacking him, this FBI on his back, the water hoses on him. He was on the front line. His non-violence came from, I believe, Black people are morally superior to white people in this. I believe we are superior, that we have the capacity to take all of this nonsense and still not react in the way that you lot are, showing that Black people are actually more humane than the racist white supremacists. And in many ways, you can say that's a bit more radical than Malcolm.
Yeah, that is, to be honest, you could say that is, because it was always like, when you look at just history in general, it's always like Black people are just always portrayed as animalistic, like bestial. Like even when you look at Edu Said, and he talks about Orientalism, and he talks about the Orient, it's always like you're always exoticized to another level. You're always animalistic. So when Martin turns around and said, you know what, you lot are actually the animals now, it's almost like,
thank you.
Yeah, that I see that. Do you know, I never looked at it from that perspective though. That's crazy. Yeah, but I think
that's what decolonizing history does. You see?
Yeah. But like, I think one thing that I realized also is that when it comes to learning though, I think that in school it's almost as if, even when you look at Martin and Malcolm, I think it's always interesting to also go through their journey to, like, I think before you look at when you look at Malcolm and how he starts out and how he's kind of with the Nation of Islam, and then how he progresses. And I remember when he comes back from Hajj, and they're like to him, okay, cool, so are you kind of like, are you not that person anymore? Are you not kind of against segregation anymore? And it's almost like, I think they wanted him to kind of not whitewash himself, but to almost concede what everything that he was saying was wrong. But then it was never really what Malcolm was saying was, he was always sincere. That's what I feel like. I feel like he was always sincere. But then when he gets to the end of his life, like before he dies, it's almost like once he goes to Hajj, he realizes, and even on his travels, he just realizes from a wider perspective that, okay, cool, this is mostly a Western ideology that's been pushed into kind of like how we think and how we move. So what do you think? Do you think that Malcolm changed at all, as in through that period, or do you feel like he was consistent?
The only thing Malcolm changed is he went from a separatist. That's the only thing he did. He no longer was I want a Black only state away from everyone. That's the only thing he changed. Other than that, he still wasn't like madly pro-white after Hajj. Let's not. I think a lot of the time people use Malcolm X's end of his life to kind of say, well, he was a anti-white person, and he became pro-white. No, he was very much like, he still didn't believe like white people should join Black movements. Yeah. He still said white people should set up their own movements and educate their own communities. But again, I would say that whole thing of like wanting a Black only state, so what we know today as Black nationalism, he moved away from that. That's true. At one point, and I think people did this in general to whitewash Malcolm, but I think it's very important. You mentioned the point of, him changing, but his sincerity for me comes through when he says that, a reporter asked him, white people are loving you now, you're becoming more and more accepted, you're becoming more and more, after post-Hajj, you denounced certain views of the nation, blah, blah, blah. What do you say about that? And you're respected now. How does that affect you? I'm paraphrasing. But what he said was, in response, no matter what respects whites show towards me, no matter how much special treatment I get from white people, if it is not shown for every single one of my people, it doesn't exist for me. And that's where his sincerity comes through. And, I put on my Twitter the other day, he said that, I want to be known as someone who's sincere. When I was right sincerely. When I was wrong, I did it in sincerity. A lot of people, I think a lot of people forget about that, because even being wrong even when you're wrong with sincerity, still means you're sincere.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I think when you look at Malcolm, I think the reason why you could see he was so selfless is because he always felt like, you know what, like when you look at how he evolved, it's always like there's, I think a lot of activists at the time, you look at Bobby Seale, Fred Hampton, all of these guys, it's almost like you're tired of being the native. Like it's always like as if like you're always like once you always have the native and you have the settler. And then I feel like as a native, you're tired of constantly being oppressed. And I think a lot of it comes down to, look, this has been going on for some time now, and it's like, okay, cool, how do we then evolve and take ourselves out of the paradigm of the native and the settler? Because when the settler comes in, they stamp their identity onto you. And I think with Malcolm, what he preached a lot of the time was like, okay, cool, I'll be the native, but at the same time, I'm going to reject the paradigm and the power shift between the native and the settler. So I think another thing that even Fanon talks about is inequality in Western culture today. So if you look at, for example, how Meghan Markle is treated, for example, right now in the media, and how she's kind of criminalized.
Listen, I'm standing for Meghan Markle right now. even though it's abolished the monarchy today, tomorrow, and yesterday, and every year after that, yeah. However, when it comes to Meghan Markle, we're standing for our biracial or Black heritage sister. But anyway, carry on.
Nah, for sure. Nah, and do you know what's crazy?
No Meghan Markle slander will be tolerated. Before you start, let's not slander nobody now. Just joking.
I saw a video. Someone sent me a video today that there's already the royal family experts already coming out and denouncing her and saying, and they're already going against the documentary, but the documentary isn't even out yet. All the interviews.
You gonna watch it?
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it. It's out. I think in the UK, I think it's out tomorrow at like 8 p.m.
But it's by that time Twitter will already be talking about it. I have to watch it tonight.
That's what I'm saying.
Mr. World Premier will be my friend tonight.
That's because I think I'm gonna be up like 1 a.m. then. That's gonna be like 1 a.m. probably. Yeah. So okay. Yeah, I'll probably watch it.
You're in lockdown anyway. You can go back.
Yeah, true. But yeah, like what do you think about what do you like? It's because you know what it is. I'm not gonna lie to you. Sometimes it's weird, but there's always like a thing of like, okay, cool. If you're maybe biracial or you're lighter skinned, it's almost as if sometimes, I don't know, it might be weird, but I feel like the community might almost feel like, all right, cool, you're probably, because you can pass to a certain extent. Like I think Meghan can pass as
as Italian fam.
Yeah. So when even she's being attacked, you can understand the extent into how pure the British royal family want to, like the way they want to preserve their purity. But I think one thing about Meghan Markle is that the way they criminalized her was a shock to me. I don't know why.
Hey, you quoted Frantz Fanon so many times and you found that shocking?
Do you know why I say it's shocking though? Because I feel like to me, I never felt like it would be this explicit and open. Do you know? And I don't know if maybe that's just me being naive, because I should.
What year were you born?
98.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see what they did to Diana.
Yeah.
She was white, Diana's white.
True.
But she was an outsider. She wasn't high class. That's why they did this.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. It could be class, or it could be from a racial perspective. But I think one thing that I saw was that as soon as she kind of took herself out of the royal family equation, the scrutiny became more and more. And it's funny because you see people like Piers Morgan, for example, that are fully going in on her, but it's like, you're the same person who was associated with Trump. You're the same person who was friends with Epstein, and a lot of people need to also be questioned around this.
And you only named two. You only named two. Trump, Weinstein, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah.
With Prince Andrew, the whole person got seen. I'm like, Prince Andrew, we've seen the tape. Seen the footage. The footage says that you were holding a young girl and you went to the island several times with your mates, with your Trump, Bill Clinton, and every other nonce involved. Went there. Allegedly, before they come and sue me. Before they come and sue me, allegedly. So all these men, they were there on that island that Jeffrey Epstein bought. Then they X'd him off. X'd him off. I don't know who. And now, but Piers Morgan, you can tweet, you can write 20, 30 articles about Meghan Markle. You can tweet all day incessantly, harassing a pregnant woman who just had a miscarriage. Yeah? You can put a picture of you faking to throw up when she announces that she's pregnant. You're a sick individual. But Prince Andrew, you won't say nothing. You know, you're sick. Yeah. And you know what's funny? GMB is who? Piers Morgan and Susanna Reid. You have two people sitting next to each other, yeah?
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, why is Susanna like, you're seeing a man attack a woman constantly and you're not even saying anything about it? And for me, it screams of what Angela Davis speaks of white feminism. Yeah. White feminism has nothing to do with women. White feminism is to allow white women to be close to the patriarchy. That's what it is. If white feminism existed in the same way it does now during the times of slavery, the call would have been what? The call would have been, let white women own slaves too. It wouldn't be abolish slavery. See, there's a difference there. Whereas like abolition movements were, we don't just want slavery abolished for black people, we want slavery abolished, period.
Yeah. And I think when you're talking about feminism, that's do you know what? Not only is it white feminism, but I think there's a hint of the white liberal, and how like I remember there's one book that I was reading called White Fragility, and the author Robin DiAngelo, she was basically saying
terrible book, but anyway.
I disagree. I think it was a good book. I think there was hints. I only read the first half.
We can disagree. I have no issue with that. But my question is, why is a white woman profiting off this topic, please?
Okay, I get that perspective, but at the same time, it's almost as if, you know, when we're talking about why are, for example, white individuals racist and they need education. It's not our job to educate white people. I feel like white people should, it's not my job to educate you on your oppression. You know what you're doing. So I feel like the way I looked at it was like, look, you don't have to listen to one of your own, because you're not going to listen to me, or you clearly don't want to listen to me.
I hear that perspective, even though she's bringing another book out again. Anyway,
yeah, I feel like she should stop. Anyway, so she was basically saying that from her experience, she learned that, and it's funny because she's probably a white liberal herself, but it's almost like you never trust a white liberal. And the white liberal, and I think the white liberal and white, and even like feminism or white feminism kind of are intersectional, like they kind of overlap. And when you look at when you're talking about feminism, the roots of feminism, and this is why I tell a lot of women that I speak to who claim that they're feminists, I tell them, are you sure you're a feminist? Because whenever you, for example, if you're saying you're part of this movement, you have to know the foundations and the roots of where that movement comes from. And as you were saying before, like, it's well known that feminism was actually started by a lady that was called Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and she felt that white women deserved more rights than black men. So that's where it came from. It came from wanting to have more power than the male other. And I think when people understand, when you link that to, for example, the Me Too movement, and how, again, this was a movement started by a black woman who was then hijacked by like these white female celebrities that kind of, and never gave no credit to. I always felt like no one can deny that feminism has always been exclusive just to white women. And I think
this is why we have to read black feminist radicals. Black feminist radicals come from a tradition of abolition. So Angela Davis being one, for example. Crenshaw, who coins intersectionality the term. And the many bell hooks, for example. I think where we need to read feminism, and I think you know what? It's just what you said about we're not doing the work. Yeah. Even when white people do it, they do it wrong. I'm sorry. Even when white people do feminism, they do it wrong. When white people do racist, anti-racist work, they do it wrong. Like time and time again, it's black people having to pick it up and say, and even Marxism. That's what Marxism. I don't know too much in it. Marxism, one of the best critiques of capitalism we have known. Yeah. However, Marxism, Karl Marx as well, didn't really, or classic Marxism, didn't really take into consideration how race intersects. Who then comes along and inserts race? It's the Black Marx tradition. So you've got Cedric Robinson, who writes Black Marxism, who inserts, and you've got other, we've got many Black Marxists today and past and present who kind of insert the topic of race into the conversation. So my point is that every time white people do it, and again, and white individuals do it, and many a time they may be well-meaning, sometimes they're not well-meaning, but it's always black people have said, okay, this is what you've got. Here's how we make it more inclusive. Here's how we make it better. Intersectionality by Kimberly Crenshaw. What was that about? Even though I know one of your questions was identity politics and representational politics, which we'll go into shortly. But that term intersectionality was what? It was to determine and identify and connect different forms of discrimination. So for example, in the case study of Black women being discriminated at work, is it because they're Black or is it because they're women? That was the first question.
Yeah.
Intersectionality tells you, no, there's a specific violence that is enacted upon Black women. Likewise, me and you being Black and Muslim. Specific intersectionality, for example, we will experience anti-Black racism from white people, from Arab people, from South Asian people. But we may also experience Islamophobia from Black people. Some Black people saying to us, you're not really Black because, why are you following the Asian man religion? Why are you following the Arab man religion? Don't you know that Arab enslaved Black people? Don't you understand how these men are racist to you, man? Especially if you're sometimes a Black Christian, they'll be like, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, is a false prophet. So you know what I mean? So again, intersectionality helps connect the dots. And to be honest, no one has just one identity. That's the problem I find with a lot of these white liberal movements. They just try and make it a one identity problem where no one has one identity.
No, 100%. I agree. I think when you look at intersectionality, it's actually, I think before it's such an important term because I think a lot of people feel like they're in a space of like liminality, like they don't know where they are. They're just floating, and it's almost like when that comes in, it unites people. But just going back to Black feminism, do you feel like that could be problematic as well? Because I feel like at times, maybe it's just me, but I feel like even that term Black feminism, do you feel like sometimes it kind of plays into those same stereotypes that maybe the white man or woman uses to kind of portray a Black man in a certain type of way? Do you feel like maybe they can be negative at times? Because that's how I feel.
No, I can't. I don't feel like that. I'll be honest with you. I probably used to. But this is our male fragility speaking. Because you see a lot, don't get me wrong, let's keep it 100. I mean, I don't care. They can cancel me 10 times. Me, I don't care. But no one pays my bills, so it's okay, I'll talk. Yes, there's obviously an uncomfortable conversation that needs to be had. And there's things where Black women or women in general come across as they just hate men. And they're very toxic towards men. And they, however, I don't let. And second of all, I'm someone who tries to be someone of substance. Let me interrogate the argument, no matter what package it comes in. If the argument is we need to speak about, let's say, colorism, for example, or how Black men perpetuate colorism, or how Black men perpetuate anti-Black women tropes, for example, or gaslight Black women. Consistently. No matter how packaged, and let's be honest, our sisters, they come with vim sometimes, and they come with guests, and it's sometimes the wicked tongues that they have, they want to smite you with it.
Yeah.
You know what? I kind of like, okay, that's hard. I have an ego, but I realize I don't know what it's like to be a woman. And the position that I follow is a condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. That's my thing. And black women and women in general, and black women more particularly, are saying they experience a specific type of violence. And I think in that situation, as men, we should be allies to that cause.
Yeah.
If you don't want to, not saying you, by the way, people in general, if you feel like the way it's being done, you can't hack it because it hurts you, then I would say then go to black feminism writers and read their works.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, this is where a lot of people get misconstrued, because I think what black women are saying needs to be heard. And you know what? And it's not only what I realize is what black women are saying is their statistics to uphold these facts, as in how they're being treated in by medical practitioners and etc. It's clear to see. Even colorism, it's clear to see. So, but it's, you know what I feel like, and obviously I don't think you can really do it within our community, but it's almost as if like sometimes I feel like, yeah, cool, like, yeah, you're right and stuff, and I think it has to be said, but it's almost like it might be right, but it can feel uncomfortable, because like you as a black woman you're perpetuating these same negative stereotypes that are attributed to us. However, at the same time, I think, cool, if that means that if that's the case, then I think, yeah, obviously they should be able to say whatever they want in it, because obviously I'm for
the difference between equality and equity. And a lot of the time I find black men have this discussion about equality, saying, well, if I said that to you, I will be called misogynistic. If I said that to you, I will be called the woman hater. But I'm saying, I hear you, bro, but that's equality. We're looking for equity. Equity is addressing and redressing the imbalance between the genders now. We understand as a black man, yes, of course, let's not. We experience racism at the hands of the police and experience racism at the hands of the state, and all these things happen. However, who bears the brunt of that most?
Yes, black women. For sure. Yeah, for sure.
And even, I mean, Bell Hooks is a bit controversial in this. She doesn't even say it's black women, by the way. She says black children.
Oh, raw.
She said that when it comes to the totem pole of patriarchy, the absolute bottom are black children. Because she says that because they get it from, and they can't even tell their story first and foremost. So they don't even know what they're going to experiences. And then they grow up to be messed up, individuals who have deep problems. But then they are having violence enacted upon them by black men, either by way of leaving them or not being adequately, not adequately fathering them. But then they also have violence enacted upon them by black women. Do you know what I mean? So black children bear the brunt of the most. But obviously, in terms of us as men, we have to recognize that there's an imbalance between us and the gendered violence that I feel like we have to, I don't know, to make it more equitable, we raise up the black women voices personally. And again, I feel like, don't get me wrong, by the way, that's not to say what every single black woman says is always right. It's not. Like no one is right 100% of the time. What every single black man says is not right. What every single any person says is not going to be right all the time. But this is where I think intersectionality is used incorrectly. Because you're now seen as the most, what intersectionality is supposed to do is just to identify and connect discrimination. What it's not supposed to do is to create a hierarchy of oppression where you engage in oppression Olympics. And by virtue of you being a black woman or a black trans woman, for example, it now means that we cannot be critical of you because of your identity. And I think that's wrong. Because what it does now, we get black Tories who reproduce white supremacy, but because the woman at the head of it is a marginalized community, we can't speak on it. That's nonsense.
100%. And I think even going back to what you were saying about black women, I think Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison are two authors that continuously touch on it. And I think when I was reading their book, they talk about the kind of the assault that they've gone through, the physical assault and sexual assault they've gone through as children, and then when they grow up, or even after that traumatic experience, they can't speak. So I feel like when you look at it, it's so true, because you have to understand that even though when we look at it from an adult perspective, the black woman is probably the most oppressed. However, when they've gone through the whole load of trauma that society has given to them, that then kind of trickles down into how they raise their kids. And so it is a very good point, I think. And even with intersectionality, again, it's when you look at Priti Patel, for example, and you look at the BAME community kind of grouping, you can't ever yeah, exactly. No one can be absolved from being criticized because of their color. I agree. But what do you think about this idea of representation, about us? Because I think a lot of people learned the hard way through Obama when it comes to representation. But
I know I did. I did.
Yeah, like I to be honest, I didn't know enough about politics. I just saw, yeah, it's a black person, it's history, and that's one thing. I think another thing that I learned from that, not only representation, but it's, we can't be excited to be the first to do something, and we have to get out of this crabs in a bucket mentality. How did you learn from that Obama incident and him being elected and his presidential stint?
Oof. I mean, the thing is, I've moved away from having black and brown faces in high places to somehow be a signifier of progress on racial justice, because ultimately it's not. Ultimately, as Cornel West says, the success or progress of black people is not measured by how well the black middle class are doing. Yeah. At the end of the day, that's what happens. And I think it actually works in opposition to us, because now it allows white liberals, it allows neoliberals, it allows the state to say, we're not racist. Like, think about it. How can we now properly, adequately assess racism in the Conservative Party, or racism in conservative policies, when the people instituting the policies are black and brown faces? When the brown Priti Patel is a brown woman. Kemi Badenoch, who needs to start wearing a bonnet when she sleeps, is a black woman. Yeah? By the way, that's my litmus test, by the way. My litmus test of how serious I take your critique on race analysis is your relationship with your hair. because I'm telling you, yeah, when I saw them Make America Great Again, Capitol, them who stormed the Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And the black man was with them. I didn't see one shape up or one fade inside. That man had 0 on the side and 1 on top. So if you go to Tony and Guy, you can't talk about race. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I feel you. And this is and that's the problem. I feel like there's a lot of people that I think in politics is just recognized now that, okay, cool, who can we get in position to make it look like, who can we get at Fox, or who can we get as a conservative, and how can we kind of shape ourselves as not being kind of a racist or whatever. But I think one thing that you have to realize is that now we're taking a step back and we're thinking, look, you lot already gave, I don't know, for example, Obama a chance or whatever. But when you take a step back and you look at the history of, for example, politics in America, or even politics in the UK, and you look at for example, the Conservatives, we don't even have to go back to 54 when they were outwardly calling people nigger with a hard R. We can even go back to, for example, Tony Blair, when he collaborated with George Bush to kill 1 million people in Iraq. These things have been and have continuously been exploiting black and brown people for years. So when you're appointed now as part of this party, we look at you sideways, like, you know the history of this party, you know the history of this country. What's your agenda here? Do you know what I mean? And we look at the word.
Think about what it says, though. I know we're flying around topics here, but think about the Conservative Party. Boris Johnson called black people, we have watermelon smiles. He called us pickaninnies, and he said he's afraid of black boys when he goes out at nighttime. Yeah, that's what Boris Johnson is. Boris Johnson then called women who wear the niqab letterboxes. Yeah, he called all these things. But look at the Conservative Party. they're the only party to have delivered 2 female prime ministers. Our leftist party hasn't done that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
See what I mean? What it says about white people, white women, and their proximity to patriarchy, for example, and the leftist movement. As for the leftist movement, you know me anyway, I've moved away from this idea of parliamentary politics anyway. I feel like, obviously, I would vote Labour, obviously, because I think it's to, you know, but again, with the whole, it's like the Obama thing now, even now, Joe Biden, yes, I think it's important to get Trump out, but you know, Biden, you know, he was the mastermind behind the 94 crime bill, which saw the incarceration of several hundred thousands of Black people. Was a free strike rule. He called Black people predators. Yeah. Yes, he seems to want to atone for his issues. He's got a Black, half Indian woman as vice president. But one thing that told me, no matter what color the faces of the empire, is still an empire.
Yeah.
I think Obama hurt me more. You know why Obama hurt me more? Because with Joe Biden, I'm not expecting much.
Yeah.
With Kamala Harris, who was a cop and a prosecutor, and he wanted to prosecute Black women for not sending their kids to school for truancy and throw them in prison. I know what I'm getting. But with Obama, he posited himself as the inheritor of Martin Luther King's legacy. So he said, you know, change, hope, a new way. I'm going to close Guantanamo Bay. I'm going to address racial, all these things, and the racial inequities, all these things. But what happened? No, he didn't. Black Lives Matter emerged under a Black president and a Black attorney general.
Wow. Yeah.
Eric Holder and Barack Obama. That's who it emerges under. Yeah. He calls Black when they were writing. Obama called Black people thugs, preying into racist stereotypes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he called them thugs. He went to Flint, Michigan, and drinks the water in front of the crowd. He goes to Wall Street and says, "I am the person who's going to protect you guys." So, I mean, like, again, the empire is still the empire. And then we know he's drone attacked 20,000 bombs a year during his presidency.
That's crazy.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, again, like unmanned drones. You know, my thing is that, you know what? Again, ultimately, it's the empire, no matter what face it is of the empire. And I feel like I'm just praying that Black people lose their bondage with Obama and lose their bondage with having Black and brown faces in high places. Because now, let's go for substance. Because I would much rather have a Bernie Sanders be an advocate for me than Obama, 100%.
Or even a Jeremy Corbyn than a Boris Johnson. Or even
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So my thing is that, again, I think, but I want to ask you though, I know you're interviewing me, but like, what was your how did you kind of come up with Obama?
I think when I first found out about Obama, I was just super excited because I just thought like, this is a big, it was kind of like a big feat. And I felt like this was just so exciting. And everyone around me was just so gassed. I was like, yeah, I'm gassed as well. Like, I just thought it was mad. But then, like, I think a couple years later, I started to look at, and I started to do research into what people were saying about his stint as a president and stuff. And I just started realizing like, wow, he potentially has similar numbers, if not worse numbers when in regards to oppression and bombing and etc. to Trump. So it was almost like, it was a shock to me, but at the same time, I thought it was a shock, but I also felt that you have to look at how America's running and laws and legislation. And to be honest, it wouldn't stop at Obama. Like if Obama...
Sure, but let's agree with you, but I think not you, but people in general, we have to move away from him. Like people tend to say, but you know, he's only one man. But you knew what he went into, and now you've come out of the presidency, he still hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
He still hasn't said that. He's saying, I was tired, but this is what I wanted to do. He hasn't said that. Rather, he wrote a book, The Promised Land, which I read recently. And one thing about Obama, see, he's an amazing writer, an amazing speaker. That's what I'll give him that, yeah? And has got a beautiful family. As for like him, like I read The Promised Land where he's speaking about his drones. And he's saying that, you know, I personally think, when I read that, I think he's either a psychopath and a sociopath. He said in that book, you know, these men, the dangerous men, and I wish that I could reform them. give them an education, give them a better quality of life. However, the machinery that I commanded had me all too often killing them. I thought, wow, like you're mad. Like this guy is not all there, bro. Like he wrote that in words. That's how I was saying that. And I thought, yeah, the no accountability. He recently came out and said why defund the police is a bad idea. And I think, yeah, you haven't even changed. After all of that, one thing that made me about Obama, I realized his most important thing in his whole presidency was ensuring that he remains popular and liked by people. That's what I realized.
And do you know what? Yeah. Do you know when it comes to him being popular, one thing that was made clear was that a lot of different like political critics around him at the time were saying that the only reason why Obama was kind of fighting on so many different fronts, for example, the LGBTQ community, even the kind of Latin and Mexican communities, it was almost because they were paying him more and contributed more to his election and his campaign. So you have to look at that, like, was everything that you were doing just motivated by money and being in a position of power, or did you really want to create change? And I think when you look at the outcome of his like him being president, it's clear to see that it was motivated clearly by just money and his self-interest.
That's all it was. Self-interest, ensuring that he, remains popular. He was just a centrist, like no radical movement, no, you know what I mean?
And I think he was good at keeping everyone happy. He was good. That's what
he wanted. Then the funny thing is, for what avail? To what avail? You made everyone happy for 8 years to let Trump in and the Republican Party just shit on you. And shit on like they look up at Mitch McConnell, all the people, they don't care about people. They're all self-serving. So yeah, man.
Yeah, I think one thing about I'd just say Black people in general right now around the world when it comes to politics and stuff, I feel like we're more maybe woke than ever. We don't really care anymore what you promise, or because you know what is, this is a problem with a lot of these politicians, is it's a whole load of promises and it's never a clear, concise plan and action that you lot are going to put into place to create change. And I think what Obama was so good at doing was he was so good at selling dreams. Like I just thought, I felt like, now, when people are like, when they're talking about history repeating itself and how for example, when you're maybe the working class or you're the oppressed, that you're always going to end up rebelling. I felt like there was kind of a mini revolution going on, and then just to be so underwhelmed, I feel like if you were to just maybe put it in one word, his stint as president, you would have to say you're just underwhelmed, basically. But like, yeah, that's the
underwhelmed is putting it nicely, I guess.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people would be
enraged.
Yeah, but like, do you feel like when you're looking at like political history just in the West in general, do you feel like there's any route out of it? Do you feel like we're maybe we have a potential route out of it, or do you feel like we have to find ourselves out? We have to find a route out ourselves through maybe back home in Africa and Asia and etc.
I definitely support, like, obviously the self-determination of African people, 100%. But as Dr. Angela Davis said, that one never knows when the conditions may arise that allow for radical change. So always stay organized. And that's my motto in life. Okay, yes, I have lofty ambitions and dreams and I want to reimagine the world. So that's like what I put there. However, how we're gonna get there is that we do it step-by-step process. And two, you never know what might happen with Brexit. Obviously, I personally don't believe an armed revolution is gonna happen in the West. First of all, I think against the American government, army, I'm counting me out. I'm good. British thing, I think people are way too comfortable. The material conditions don't really exist for armed revolution. However, a revolution of consciousness, absolutely. But again, you never know. Brexit might impoverish some people. You never know. Again, I just feel like time and time again, I feel upset that we're not French, because I said that someone put, I saw a meme the other day that said that if Boris had handled French people and handled the coronavirus in France, they would have had him by his singlet and 10 Downing Street. You know, French people, they don't, French people, they don't play in the same way, but you know, British people a bit, I don't say they're going to revolt like that. Am I calling for that? Probably not either. Probably not either. I don't think the material conditions allow for that. But again, it just means we stay organized. I wouldn't say I adopt a defeatist mentality to say that, oh, nah, it's not going to happen. Let's go back to Africa. Because we go back to Africa, and I think I want to speak to my fellow brothers and sisters and people who fit out of those, who don't fit into those binaries, of us in the diaspora not acting like neo-colonialists or gentrifiers when we go back to the continent. That's one thing we can do. We can end up doing. We can end up going to the continent and, let's say, raising up prices of things because we've got a bit more capital. Employing only a certain type of people, for example, involving in nepotism and these things like this, and what are all buying properties or buying land, which raises their prices up and moves people out who can't afford to live in that area anymore. So one thing I want to say, yes, I think we should. The best way, as always, if we're going to go to back home, collaborate with people who live back home, who live that experience. Because yes, we obviously identify as Gambian, but I can go there. I don't know the landscape very well. I don't know the day-to-day ins and outs, and I don't want to end up going there and end up reproducing like imperialism and neo-colonialism when I get there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think, but with what you're saying, I think it ties in nicely to social media and performativity, because we're looking at how many different issues, look at the discourse that we're having on social media. You've got Brexit, you've got returning back home to the motherland, you've got, for example, you're fighting for political freedom in, like people in the West, like the others fighting for kind of political freedom. So you have all these different types of issues, and you take that to social media now. There's a million different discourses going on how do we, for example, achieve kind of maybe like like how do we become self-sustaining, and how do we move back home and kind of support our own. Do you think that social media has kind of become like a melting point for kind of creating a lot of confusion and all these different ideas? Because it feels like so many things are flying around. You're like, wow, where do I start? Like, what do you think about it?
I tell people all the time, man, like honestly, two things I learned, but two things that have been heavy on me recently, because obviously countries are in lockdown, meaning more people on social media, more people are on like, you know, Twitter and these things like, and, you know, sharing ideas. But two things that have become abundantly clear for me: people need to read more. You don't want to read more audiobooks. You don't do audiobook documentaries. All I'm saying, I say all of that to educate yourself on the issues before you make an opinion, before you have a judgment on it. And secondly, one thing I've learned is to be really intentional about who I want to be in community with. Because you cannot be in community with everyone on social media. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I said this the other day on Clubhouse. I was like, listen, because I chatted to some like black neoliberals and black conservatives and things like this, yeah. And the way they're talking and reproducing white supremacy, I thought I made a funny title afterwards. I was like, listen, when the revolution comes, I'm sorry, but some niggas have to get shot. We can't. Take everyone. I'm sorry. We can't take everyone with us. I'm sorry. So my intentionality in community with certain people is that, listen, I can only do what I can do. Yeah. And again, it's not like a defeat. I'm like, no, I want to do big things. But my way of doing big things is political education and being on the front line when I can be on the front line. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Yeah. Those who find what I'm doing interesting and want to be a part of it, please join me, and please, like, you know, educate me where I'm getting things wrong. I'm telling you, I've educated so much on like the gender stuff recently. I didn't understand it that much. The whole gender debate, I'm getting more into and reading about it. Intersectionality, more so, and all the black feminism, all these things, yes. And obviously, again, not in a hierarchical nature, I want to be head of a movement, because I think the days of those single figure movements have long passed now. But collaborative effort with people. However, people who share the same vision and who want to do the work. As for people who just want to constantly drag you and, you know, drag people on Twitter and be in my mentions or this and that, I don't have time. I'm sorry. I can't come and die.
Yeah, you can't. Do you know what's mad as well? Malcolm was actually saying this. He was like, at his time, he said he finds being the leader of a movement always problematic because there's always jealousy and envy, and he always finds that if he wants to do something, he wants to do it from a collaborative perspective, which is what we have to learn now. Is like, you trying to be the figure of the Black community, there's always going to be someone who maybe thinks, oh yeah, that's not right, or there's always going to be disagreements. Yeah. So
and then what do we do? And I think ultimately people forget this point, because, you know, like with me, I'll be honest with you, I've been criticized a few times. I get dragged on Twitter, which I don't care. But my thing is that ultimately, Malcolm X died with a 30% approval rating amongst Black people.
Oh, bro, that's crazy.
Martin Luther King died with a 52% approval rating amongst Black people. Look how history celebrates them now. You see what I mean? So like, it's not about being popular. It's not about being liked. And I think, let's not say being liked is different to being like, just don't be rude, innit? No one's saying be rude. No one's saying be arrogant. But the thing of like, I'm not gonna speak because out of fear of not being liked by certain people. Nah, that can't run, man.
Yeah.
Speak your truth. Those who resonate, resonate. Those who don't resonate, don't resonate. Keep pushing.
Yeah, 100%. I think on social media now as well, it's almost like, you see when we were in lockdown before, and it was almost like the George Floyd situation happened. It was like my first thought, and I think sometimes it's almost like my first thought is like, I felt like we become desensitized to that type of oppression, which is so scary, because if you watch the video, it's almost like when watching everyone break down, it was almost like, wait, this is weird, because 2 weeks before this happened, the George Floyd incident, I was in uni and I was just talking about certain Black issues and how I felt. And it was just general stuff. It wasn't anything deep. And I remember like saying something, and I remember like the whole class laughing at what I was saying. And it was just clearly like, whoa. And then 2 weeks later, everyone's reposting the same thing that I was saying at university. So it was almost like this. I can't take social media seriously because I don't know who's real and I don't know who's being performative. Do you get what I'm saying?
So even the language on social media. Sorry, carry on, bro.
No, carry on. I'm done.
Even the language on social media. You post a post. What's the way of engaging with it? You like it. You know what I mean? You have to like it. Yeah, it's that thing of feeding someone's ego of, oh, I'm being liked, or this post banged. Obviously, no one's free from the ego stuff here, but when you're doing it for the likes, that's problematic for me.
No, it is. I think
I said that the other day.
Yeah.
You posted your black square. You're doing black square. You posted your black square, but today, in 2021 March, I don't see race in your bio anymore. I don't see anything. Even the black square, you came to archive it.
Yeah.
And if I talk, they'll say, why are you talking? So.
And this, like, you know, and that's why I appreciate certain people that will still be like, BLM wasn't a trend and they're still going hard. Cool, I get that. But like, there's certain people that it's kind of like a flash in the pan thing for them. But one reason why I even liked your Instagram page was because when you'll put something like you'll tweet something and maybe like screenshot it, put it on Insta, and it's like everyone's just engaging with a certain discourse. And one thing that I've realized is I've been like, do you know what? I've created a platform which is not really like, because when you're on social media, it's almost like, oh yeah, I'm just on social media to kind of promote stuff and do this and do this. But then I almost wish now, and I think I will try and in the future try and move to trying to create a discourse. I love having conversations and trying to like exchange views and opinions with people. And I think that's one thing that was sick about your page, is that you could just go in the comments and everyone could just talk. Do you get what I'm saying? Which is so sick. But apart from that, I feel like there's not many people.
Disclaimer though, people, yes, my page is for that thing. Don't come with nonsense in my comments. So. Don't come. You can disagree with me, please. Disagree. It's fine.
Yeah.
Just don't be rude. That's my thing. Don't be rude, because I'm a bit fiery still.
Yeah. But I feel like you know what? Yeah, there's one thing that I learned as well is that there's an etiquette with like how you speak to people and how you respond. Like even if someone's trying to be coming with like some brazy type of comments and something that's maybe trying to be even offensive, if there's always a way to maybe go about that conversation. And another thing as well that I've learned is that sometimes there's no need for you to reply. There's no need for it. So that's one thing that I've learned. But I think when it comes to social media in general, when it comes to people's opinions, and this is one thing about, I think Twitter is way more dangerous than even Instagram, because on Twitter's
a mess.
No, Twitter is, do you know it's Twitter? Yeah, this is one thing. Like sometimes I'm on Twitter and I'm like, this is hilarious, it's funny, cool, whatever. But then there's sometimes where I'm like, why do certain people have access to it? Because you can go on and you can say whatever you want to say outrageously, and who's really gonna check you? Like, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, but that's what I think about it. But like, yeah, man, it's been a really good conversation.
I really enjoyed this, man. Thank you for the space, bro.
Nah, thank you, man. I was, you know what? When I was DMing you, I thought, do you know what? This guy's probably busy. But now I've always been keeping up with like a lot of the work you lot are doing. A lot of the guys, even on Baraka Boys, they're doing some amazing work. And I think you don't need to do some more. You don't need to do some more episodes on Baraka Boys.
Different types of the world, man. We're all in different parts of the world, man.
Oh, okay, I see. Nah, but like, yeah, I think that the Themalcolmeffect podcast is amazing as well. So I look forward to both.
I'm grateful, man.
Yeah. So thank you, man. It's actually an honor to have you on, because wanted to do the podcast for a long time. But yeah, man. Now, thank you for coming on in it. So hopefully we'll get you on for another episode very soon.
Whenever, man. Honestly, whenever, man. I love to, man. We'll be in touch anyway.
All right, thank you very much. All right. See you later, man. Inshallah. All right. Salam.
But just leave, yeah?